absolute pleasure in doing this with the two of you, probably leading the two of the leading organizations from an engineering. Get right into it and start with the first question for both of you. You lead large enterprises where scalability, safety, and accuracy of innovation is of utmost importance. Whereas we in India are known for frugal innovation that is iterative in nature. So I wanted to understand how do you manage to strike the balance between the expectations of your larger organization and the engineering culture in India?
All right, good morning, everybody. Anirudh, thank you. Pleasure to be with you and Manu. I've done this with Manu a few times. So again, very happy to be back on this stage and with nasscom. Innovation, especially in our industry, which, like you very rightly said, is a highly safety-critical industry, along with Manu's as well. He manages everything on the ground. We manage everything in the sky. But other than that, very safety critical in terms of what we do. When you're flying at 40,000 feet, innovation needs to work 100% of the time. It doesn't matter whether it's frugal or not, it needs to work 100% of the time. So that's the challenge as the industry we face. And because of the nature of work that we do, we are a highly regulated industry as well. So nothing that we do will go on board a plane without it being fully certified by regulatory bodies like the FAA and EASA and so on. That said, innovation is extremely key to an organization like ours. We tend to typically, if you have seen, lag a little bit behind our friends in the automobile industry. Usually we wait for the technology to be tested by them, and only when it's successful do we then put it on board a plane. But all jokes aside, we are working at the same levels of technology. It's just the time it takes to put something on board, as you would all appreciate. So when we look at from an innovation perspective, what we typically think of as frugal typically tends to be more incremental kind of innovation, right? India, by our culture, I think the way we have done things past, we focus a lot on what I would say incremental innovation, where it's usually done very quickly, something that you try to get fast to the market and so on. But the way we think about frugality is this sense of fail fast. Not to fall in love with your idea and just keep iterating on it, but from our industry perspective is just try something out, prototype it, and if it doesn't work, move on to the next big idea. So for us, I think it's very, very imperative is to work with like-minded people, both in academia as well as startup sort of ecosystem, who are probably a bit more agile than us because of our structures can be a little bit more bureaucratic in nature. And that's what I would say drives the speed of the innovation. We categorize our ideas as, in fact, we have come up with a new framework for how we do innovation and technology in Collins. We have ideas which are seedlings, which are just very, I would say, early ideas that we provide seed funding for, that our engineers then go and work on. Or then we have these, what I would call moonshot projects, which have the potential to change how we do things. These, of course, require a significant amount of more funding, but they're also a little bit more mature in terms of ideas. So all our employees, by the way, as a GCC, we've been investing in our own R&D for several years. Out of this has come over 1,200 patents just from our facilities in India. And this funding is available to all engineers. All they have to do is come up with an idea. It goes through a process of selection for funding. And then it could be a seedling funding. It could be a horizon, which is maybe in a couple of years, or something that's moonshot, little longer term, but requires significant amount of funding. So again, tough environment for innovation because of the regulatory concerns. Frugality for us is more fail fast rather than doing it cheap, just because, again, the nature of the business. And lastly, I want to say is we work with the ecosystem to get our innovation fast out there.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here again. Good morning, folks. Gets tested on the ground, then goes on the air, is what Savya says, and we have our challenges cut out as well in the automotive space. right now, and I'm sure in the room, there are lots of folks who are either straight working with automotive or kind of following that space. That space is extremely disrupted right now by everything that's happening on the product side, by tech, deep tech in so many ways, by geographies, call it China, call it new players. Right now, the automotive industry is absolutely at the edge when it comes to wanting to reinvent itself or forced to reinvent itself. So the word innovation, the urgency of innovation, the direness with which you need to reinvent things is extremely high. I guess it's the same with several others as well. We're going through our set of challenges, and at that time, while I second everything that Savya says about failing fast and so on, we have another added, let's say, angle on frugality when it comes to innovation for us, and that's working with constraints. If it's working with constraints on processing power, if it's working with constraints on time, if it's working with constraints on commitments, if it's working with constraints on speed, there's absolutely a lot of constraints that are thrust upon the auto industry right now, forcing to even crunch timelines like never before. I mean, from a 48, 60-month period to new players who are literally pushing in products at 18 to 20-month timeframes, there's a kind of a pressure everywhere to reinvent yourself. And I think if you delve a little deeper into the theory of constraints itself, in this scheme of things, it is possible to overlay innovation in this frugal way. When your cognitive senses are kind of given these constraints, and you're asked to invent or reinvent again, what comes out is pretty magic, right? That is, if you give it a structure, and I think we've managed to give it that structure. So every time you get an announcement to say that's not available, resources not available, money not available, processing power not available, and you still need to reach your targets, engineers are pushing themselves, and that's one more definition I can give to frugality out of a R&D ecosystem from Mercedes. We've had several use cases recently, every time you put something in the car, and unlike a mobile phone, you're not going into production in a car with excessive memory and excessive computing power. It's all just there, just enough for the code that you want in the car. So to think about squeezing more features into the car already brings in, a lot of possibilities. Recently, we had the chance to use the camera within the car for a fail-fast POC first, and then to go on and dream about what else that camera could do for us, and what else could we flash over the air into the car as new features that the customers can enjoy. I also see that geographically, culturally, we are well set to work with constraints. I mean, blame it on the way the system is around us. It helps our engineers to think with limitations and still deliver something, and we're making full use of that capability in the region to do more. So we can boast of similar innovations from our center as well, contributions to the global scheme of things, call it IP, call it ideas, call it product ideas, and the race is on to squeeze timelines in the auto industry for us, bring in more software-defined functions, and again, to repeat myself, work with constraints and still come up with a magical solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, working with constraints is also what startups are all about. So I guess, the ecosystem in India, in Bangalore, is also proof that, innovating in constraints is really a magical way to create new value. I think one of the other aspects of innovation also is, I think as we scale our R&D, how globally compelling the innovations coming from India can be. So in that, I wanted to understand, of course, there needs to be, I think, a scale of ambition difference in the kind of innovation that India comes out with. And of course, this is not a single-handed effort. I think it's a combined effort between academia, large enterprises such as yours, startups and others. So I would love to hear your thoughts around, this. We'll start with you, Savya, and then maybe go to Manu.
No, absolutely. I think, like I said earlier, academia and startup have a little bit of an advantage compared to larger enterprises like ours in terms of agility and flexibility, and that's something very key, especially if you want to have larger sort of ideas and reach market in quick succession. Right now, I would say we are at a point, especially with AI, where it's a phenomenal opportunity. I told you earlier that typically when we think about innovation, largely our innovations tend to be more incremental in nature. And what I mean is existing product, we sort of fine tune it, make it better. We Indians are really good at that. Where we lack is coming out with breakthrough innovations, right? What I think kind of keying off on what the previous session was talking about as well. And I think AI is going to be a level playing field and enabler in terms of coming up with breakthrough innovations. And I think that is going to be really key for India and our industry going forward. I would say adding to that, our need for folks who are more hyper-specialized. And when I say that, people who are more inclined towards getting their PhDs and at least their master's degrees, again, that's not something which we see very commonly in the workforce. In India, typically we see a lot of folks in the BTech, getting into the industry. But I think for us to have breakthrough innovations, we need to have people with extreme depth in some of these technologies, and we need to have a lot more PhDs coming into the workforce. So academia and that partnership with academia has a significant role. And as an industry, we need to help with the curriculum development, especially in the academia, which is more relevant to what we see are problems of tomorrow. The other notion, even in terms of, I threw a number at you in terms of number of patents that come out of our industries now. I think it is also very important that these patents are not just of academic nature. They're actually solving real problems. I know a lot of engineers have a lot of pride putting up their patent plaque, in their cubicle or at home or whatever, but the question needs to be asked is how many are actually solving real problems for our customers. So if you think about how many patents are actually getting converted, those that are coming from India, into actual products or solving problems, I would still say they are fairly small, percentage-wise. And I think as an industry, we need to do more in enabling that as well. And again, I would say, the role of academia is very important in that. The last thing I would just sort of talk about is the entire startup ecosystem. Collins engages with quite a few startups across the country in terms of bringing deep tech to products and technologies, just because they tend to be more frugal than us and are much more adaptable. The challenge, again, that I would throw to the startups is the domain expertise, right? Where we are very good at is the tech side of things, but how do you apply that tech to aerospace? How do you apply that to some safety critical product that operates at environment that is out there at 40,000 feet, which is extremes that you will never see when you are doing something in your lab locally in your offices. So that's the challenge that I will pose, is where we see that domain expertise or the lack of it being a challenge. But huge role to play along with larger enterprises in terms of taking the whole innovation idea forward.
The Mercedes-Benz startup Autobahn is active since 2018 in India, right? And it's getting better and better every year. We are not just getting better at the collaborations that we want to build in India, but we're also getting better at posing global problem statements, as Savya was saying, in the local ecosystem and trying to get solutions for that. Trying to make a mark both for ourselves as a GCC, but also for the local ecosystem and the kind of thinking solutions that they can provide for us, right? Early success, I think there's a long way to go, but we'll continue down that path. My leaders are very clear. They're bringing global problem statements, raising their hands and saying, we'll solve it out of the startup ecosystem in India, and posting that here locally. And we've met with some considerable success, let's say, right? Very interesting space to see. That's on the startup side. And with the Autobahn, we're very confident that we'll continue, even have ambitions and dreams to make it an open platform. I have several colleagues from the industry who have expressed interest to say if it's an open platform. For example, both of us still connect the dots on the word mobility, right? Doesn't matter air or land. maybe it's a bombardier who's interested in trains or something, but there are mobility related challenges that we can all solve together, and an open platform will serve a better good. So we've strong ideas on the startup ecosystem itself on one hand. On the academia, I have actually a positive spin, which most people don't expect, because there's been a lot of flack on the gap between the industry and academia and the need for preparing engineers. That's been going on for some years now. Meanwhile, with all the privatization that you see, a huge number of academic institutions have reached out. They have an industry member on their board. They want to up their syllabus. They want to teach relevant things and bring better engineers, let's say ready engineers, to the industry. This is happening at its pace, and it's okay. But what I also see is, from a mental makeup, the newer engineers who are coming in have a pace of thinking, have a speed, have a flexibility that we need, that we don't get with our long-serving teams, right? Especially geographically displaced teams. If it's a Western team, then it's even more difficult to find the flexibility that we need as a company. So when the think tank tries to flatten the earth for you as an R&D, you say that the world is pretty flat, you could get your software from China, from India for sure, from Eastern Europe, from the US, South of Americas, wherever. You tend to look for teams now more than anything else who are good at these things, good at agility, right? Good at thinking fast, the dynamics, good at frugality, like we spoke in the last 5 minutes. And I think India is doing a world of good there. So the demography, getting the 23, 24-year-old who has access to everything, who's good with Gen AI on day one, or at least has inclinations towards that on day one, is able. So I have a positive spin to the kind of talent that we're getting out of the industry. We, despite the headwinds that we have, stuck on with the batches of university mates that we got in the last 2 years, and I can tell you they are doing so well right now when it comes to innovation and kind of giving the rest of the more experienced teams the tailwinds that we desperately need. So for me, that's a standout right now.
Awesome, yeah. And I think as we speak about all of this, I think a lot of innovation starts, I guess, with one bet, one bold bet, right? So I wanted to maybe understand from each of you, maybe a personal story of a bold bet that you took, and maybe what did you learn from that, and what could we take away? So maybe we'll again start with you, Savya, and then go to Manu.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples sort of to pick from, Anirudh. So, right now, if you look at our teams in Collins, we are fortunate to have, a very large R&D center, as well as a significant factory presence in Bangalore. And we also just recently inaugurated our state-of-the-art testing facility. So we're sort of, our engineers actually have the real advantage of, driving 10, 15 minutes away and actually seeing their product come into existence right in front of them, which is, I can tell you as an engineer myself, is just the ability to go and see your product coming into life on the shop floor is just such a phenomenal kind of thing. So a lot of our ideas actually come in also from the fact that our engineers can view their products, improve, design to manufacturing, producibility. How can you sort of build a product that can support a much sort of robust supply chain? I mean, these are things that are so valuable for an engineer and for an organization. Having that entire chain actually enables that. But the idea that I will probably share with you is that of, again, a very critical challenge that we face. We've all spoken about AI, Gen AI out here. Our biggest challenge is to put them on board a plane, right? Because when everything goes through certification for us, which certification essentially means, for people who are not familiar, is to guarantee that it works 100% of the time the way it was designed to perform, right? So that's what it is. And AI by nature is non-deterministic, and how do you bring in determinism in something like that? So I'm very proud to say, my teams currently are working together to come up with a framework, and we are actually working with regulatory authorities like the FAA and EASA to come up with not only a framework, but a tool chain that looks at, whether it's a physics-based system that we have put in together, or more of a perception-based. We have this tool chain and framework that looks and validates the data at every stage of the development and also in the fielded system, and sort of validates so that it's actually performing within the right parameters. So this is one of the, I would say, cutting edge research that is happening, again, from a team both in Bangalore and Hyderabad that's leading it. Still significant amount of challenges, because now you're talking about folks in the regulatory body who have 30, 40 years in experience, but not so clued into Gen AI and so on. But to convince them about how this will work 100% of the time, or at least a very high reliability, is a huge challenge. And just proud to say that the team's working. There's still some things, especially on the perception side, that we haven't solved, but the team is very well underway to solve those as well.
In a globally distributed R&D setup like ours, it's very often that technically challenging problem statements are thrown for somebody to pick up, right? When you say bold bet, R&D centers nearly raise their hand depending on the bravado they have, on the capabilities of the teams that they lead, and see if they can really pull it off. I can go back a couple of years to when the camera was first in the cabin inside a car. And those of you familiar with an OEM, every car line manager would think 100 times, if not more, before even giving you 20 cents for an additional chip that goes in there, because he has to multiply by 2 million cars that we sell and look at the business case, right? So it's always a difficult battle when you want additional computing, additional memory inside. So we managed to squeeze in, I remember, a mono camera at that time. And somebody said nothing more than a FPGA, you won't even get a GPU to do anything at all. And we were so kind of bent on bringing vision-based systems within the camera, within the car, within the interiors of the car, in-cabin camera, as you call, that we raised our hands, right? Half knowing how we'd pull it off. Long story short, within the next kind of 8 months of burning the midnight oil, the teams were standing in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show with the first ever in-cabin entertainment, in-cabin camera, and all the features with just an FPGA, an edge-based neural network that came out of Bangalore for the very first time in a Mercedes-Benz. Nobody had done that, right? If I look back, all the leaders who raised their hands to say, Manu will pull it off, go stand for it. Today, we are the vision-based AI for the entire Mercedes-Benz sitting out of India, right? There's no center anywhere in the world who's doing vision-based AI systems for the car. And if I go ahead and see what all features and functions will be defined in the car, are today defined in the car and will be defined in the car, only based on that camera. The camera has grown to be a stereo camera right now. The compute has grown to be a GPU right now, all because somebody could raise their hands first and say, it doesn't matter, and connect it back to the previous discussion, frugal computing resources, but we want to pull this off, right? So I think that taught us a lot of things of what we can pull off for R&D if you combine boldness with logic, of course, with some common sense, but with also frugality and so on out of the center in India. That's helped us grow, that's helped us gain respect, a standing within the bigger R&D community, and I think we'll go that way down confidently, even further.
Absolutely, and what an amazing story that is of starting R&D in vision. I think for my closing, we spoke, I think, about how you are building innovation into your organizations, right? But as you go full throttle on R&D, I'm sure you're also making a bunch of build versus buy choices, right? And I am very interested to hear, how do startups play a role in the innovation that you guys do in your organization? How do you think, A, you engage with them right now, or B, more importantly, how would you like to engage with them in the future so that they become a bigger part of the value that you give? So we'll again start with Savya.
Yeah, no, I think I sort of addressed that previously as well. Is like, we have, our parent company, RTX, as well as Collins Aerospace, we call for quite a few sort of engagements with startup where we are putting out problem statements, and we are working increasingly with startups. I only see that going more, further in terms of the level of engagement, just because, like I said, they bring sort of capabilities that largest enterprises like ours sort of lack. For me, I think the the North Star is going to be, how do we achieve the domain expertise locally with the startup, especially with a niche space like aerospace. There are just a lot of folks with great, exciting technologies out there, but how do you marry it up with that domain is going to be very crucial. So that's where I think the likes of Collins and the startups can work together to shape something which will shape the future. So that's the key.
For us, it's startups, but also partners. Some of them are in the room here, right? Working with us on engineering problems together. I think large enterprises like ours often run into some really dumb, balance sheet related issues, fixed costs, headcount, and so on. And we wanted to grow way over that, looking at partners to say, just help me with capacity for some time or something. I think we've grown over that since some years now and looking far beyond. Some of them that we've signed up with, startups or otherwise, players in the room, they're all strategic partners. And we're looking at them for two reasons now. And capacity extensions are just one smaller reason. The larger reason is because we believe at R&D that we need speed more than ever before. And some of them who've already been there, done that, can just push us forward much faster. I mean, for an industry that's looking to squeeze timelines, you can't be so short-sighted, narrow-minded that you're only looking at extending capacities. Whoever can give us speed, we are running with them. So we're actually having some partners who've done that before and who are willing to just thrust us forward with their innovations, with their outputs. And we've signed up with both startups, but also companies who are able to do that. We'll further go down that path as well. Actually, the first success is just around the corner now, and we've just discovered the pleasure of working with the Indian engineering houses that can push us forward, propel us forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your perspectives. It was a really amazing session learning from you, and I do hope that the R&D reaches the next stage and we are able to give globally compelling innovations from India to the world. Thank you so much for being a part of this.